Hello dear students, welcome back after Diwali vacations. So prior to Diwali we have started with the second unit, that is study of Calotes versicolor, and if we take a brief recap of previous lecture, we have studied the systematic position with reasons of Calotes versicolor, followed by we have studied the geographical distribution of the species, habit and habitat, and the external morphology of Calotes. Now in today's lecture, the study objective will be we are going to study the digestive system of Calotes versicolor, in which we will study the parts and organs of digestive system, followed by the digestive glands and the functions of these digestive glands. So let's begin with the digestive system of Calotes. So calotes or Calotes versicolor are basically a reptilian animal which has a digestive system comprising of alimentary canal and the associated digestive glands. So we know that the alimentary canal is basically a long coil tube which has a variable diameter along its way, and this alimentary canal comprises of different parts. So in calotes it consists of mouth, buccopharyngeal cavity, esophagus, stomach, small intestine followed by large intestine, finally terminating into cloaca with a cloacal aperture. So let's study each part of this alimentary canal one by one. So we'll begin with, first we'll see this position of different parts in the body of this animal. So it starts with the mouth, which is terminally situated, from which you have here the buccopharyngeal cavity, which leads into a small tubular structure called as esophagus, and this esophagus will end into the stomach. So stomach is further divided into three parts, we'll study later. Then this stomach will lead into the small intestine. So from small intestine it will lead into the large intestine, and ultimately it will lead to the cloaca, finally opening into the rectum. And there are different digestive glands which are associated, that like liver, which is bilobed, pancreas and gastric glands, as well as intestinal glands. So let's begin from the first part of the digestive system, that is mouth. So mouth is a wide and semi-oval inverted V-shaped slit-like structure. Okay, so here you can see a V-shaped structure which is called as a mouth. It is present at the start or the terminal end of the body, and it has a wide gap. Now this mouth is bounded by a pair of toothed jaws. So there are two jaws, upper jaw and lower jaw, and teeth are present in both the jaws. Now these jaws, they are covered by thin non-muscular upper and lower lips. So here is the upper lip, here is the lower lip, and both these lips bear what is called as labial scales. Okay, so there are presence of these scales on these upper as well as lower lips. So you can see these minute scales are present. Now the boundaries of these lips, they possess many glands. These glands on the lips are called as labial glands, and their number is variable. So their number is more in the upper lip compared to the lower lip. Okay, so the lips possess the glands which are called as labial glands, and the upper lip possess the more number of labial glands. So what is the function of these labial glands? They contain the mucus cells which are going to secrete the mucus which help in the digestion process. Okay, in this picture you can clearly see a wide open mouth, a V-shaped slit-like structure. Here you can see the tongue which is protrusible, that it can come out of the body, and you have this lower lip, upper lip, you have this upper jaw, lower jaw. The roof of the upper jaw is known as palate. Then you have the nostril, you have these another opening which are present, two openings are there which are called as external nares, and you have the presence of scale all throughout the body. Yes, so jaws are provided with teeth. So here you can see these triangular teeth. They are very sharp, small and pointed, and they are recurved backward like saw. You must have seen a saw. How the teeth of the saw, they are quite similar to the saw teeth. And each teeth has a broad base. So you can see it has a broad base and it is pointed upwards. So it has pointed apex. Now these teeth, they are fused onto the jaws. This type of a dentition is called as a acrodont type of dentition. Now we move to the second part of the alimentary canal, that is called as a buccopharyngeal cavity, which is a large and compressed dorsoventrally. So this part inside the mouth is nothing but the buccopharyngeal cavity, and it is bounded by the base of skull above, and at the lower part you have the starting of the pharynx. So the anterior part, it has a skull, and posterior part it has the pharynx. Now the floor of this buccal cavity possesses median lying muscular tongue. So this is a tongue, and the roof of this buccopharyngeal cavity, as I already told you, is nothing but called as a palate. Okay, so this tongue is protrusible. What is meant by protrusible? It can come out of the mouth, so it can easily catch the prey. So you must have seen calotes catching its prey by a protrusible tongue which come out of the body, and it can easily grab the prey. The apex of the tongue, if you see, is slightly bifurcated. Okay, so it is divided into two. In the anterior region of the palate, which is the roof of the your upper jaw, you could see two slit-like openings which are called as internal nares. So we have seen external nares which are opening inside onto the roof of the skull, that is called as a internal nares. What is the role of this or function of these internal nares? They are responsible in the respiration. Now after this buccopharyngeal cavity, you starts with the pharynx. But before pharynx, you have a small opening or vertical slit which is called as a gullet. So alongside this gullet, the pharynx opens into the next part of the alimentary canal. Now this pharynx is nothing but a narrow tubular part of the alimentary canal, and which opens into the esophagus. So now we move on. So from buccopharyngeal cavity we have seen the pharynx, and from pharynx leads into the small tubular structure that is called as a esophagus. The pharynx leads to the esophagus, which is a straight narrow tube-like structure. Here you could see esophagus. So it is like a joining part between in the neck region, and on the dorsal side it has the presence of trachea, which is part of respiratory system, and it opens into the what is called as a stomach, a tubular sac-like structure that is called as a stomach. Now this esophagus appears dark in color because it has a specialized type of cell which are called as melanophores. So since they have a pigment in them, this part of the alimentary canal, that is esophagus, is darkly colored. Now if we see internally, the esophagus shows a number of folds, and finally this esophagus leads into the stomach. So you just have to remember that esophagus is a small tubular structure which connect the big buccopharyngeal cavity from pharynx to the stomach. Okay, now we move to the next part of the alimentary canal, that is stomach. This stomach is basically divided into three parts. The anterior part of the stomach is called as a cardiac stomach. Middle part of the stomach is called as fundus or the fundic stomach, and the posterior part of the stomach is called as a pyloric region or pyloric stomach. Now this stomach, if you compare with the esophagus, it is wider in diameter. So the diameter of the stomach is more than the esophagus. It is thick-walled, muscular, swollen tube-like structure on the left side of the body cavity. Okay, it is situated on the left side of the body and divided into three parts, that is cardiac, which is upper anterior region, middle part is fundus or fundic, and the lower part is pyloric region. Now esophagus, which is coming tubular structure, opens into the first part of the stomach, that is the pyloric stomach. And if you see the inner wall of the stomach, it has numerous longitudinal folds which are called as rugae. Now these rugae basically increase the surface area of the stomach for the absorption of the food material. So after stomach, we come to the next part of the alimentary canal, that is small intestine. So from the stomach arises a long, thin-walled, narrow tube-like structure. So it starts from the pyloric end of the stomach, and it is a very coiled structure. So in this picture also you can see it is a coiled structure. And further, small intestine can be divided into two parts. The anterior part is called as a duodenum and the posterior part is called as a ileum. Now this duodenum runs straight forward parallel to the stomach, and this duodenum part receives two ducts, that is bile duct and pancreatic duct at its beginning. So you can see here the gallbladder, which is one of the gland, and the ducts from this gallbladder are attached to the duodenum. Similarly, the duct of the pancreas, which is a digestive gland, they also join to the anterior part of the pancreas. So the long loop posterior part of the small intestine is called as ileum. So the second part of the small intestine is called as ileum. This is the longest part of the alimentary canal. So if we compare the length of ileum with the rest of alimentary canal, this is the longest part of the alimentary canal, and it is also very much coiled. Now this tube-like coiled structure leads into or opens into large intestine. So now we move on to the next part of the alimentary canal, that is large intestine. So the large intestine is a comparatively smaller in length than the small intestine. However, it is wider in diameter than the smaller intestine. If we divide this large intestine, it can be divided into anterior region, which is called as a colon, and the posterior region, which is called as a rectum. And on the junction of ileum and rectum, there is a small finger-like projection which is called as a cecum. So in this diagram, you can see the ileum is opening into the large intestine, but there is a blind bag-like or sac-like small protrusion or finger-like protrusion, that is called as a cecum. Now this ileum is opening into the large intestine, and the opening is guarded by a wall which is called as a iliorectal wall. Okay, so the wall present which guards the opening between the ileum and the coelom, ileum and the colon, you have the presence of ileorectal wall. Now this large intestine opens or leads into next part of the alimentary canal, that is called as cloaca, and there is present a aperture or opening which is guarded. This opening is guarded by a aperture. So this cloaca opens into the rectum or the anus. So we come to the last part, that is cloaca. So if you see this cloaca, it is basically a small tubular structure. So here you can see this cloaca, a small tubular terminal chamber in which opens the rectum and the urogenital system. So this is like a common opening for the urinary system as well as genital system. And this sac-like cloacal structure is further differentiated from internally into the three parts. So it can be differentiated into three parts, that is anterior part is called as a coprodecum, and this anterior part receives the rectum. Okay, the anterior part is like opening for the rectum. Middle part is called as urodecum, which receive the second duct, that is urogenital duct, which is a common opening of the genital and urinary system. And on the posterior part is called as a proctodecum, that opens out by the cloacal aperture. Okay, the end part of this alimentary canal is nothing but the cloacal aperture. So we move to the last part of alimentary canal called as a cloacal aperture. So this is the cloacal aperture, which is nothing but a transverse slit-like structure present on the ventral side at the junction of body trunk and the tail. So here the trunk part ends and the tail starts. So at this junction you have a transverse slit-like structure which is known as cloacal aperture. Okay. Now we move on to the second part of today's discussion, that is digestive glands. So this digestive alimentary canal is associated with different digestive glands. So in all there are four types of digestive glands, that is gastric glands, liver, then you have pancreas and intestinal glands. Now we start with the first digestive gland, that is gastric glands. So the gastric glands, they are microscopic in structure, they are very small, they are simple or sometimes they are branched. They are tubular glands which are present in the mucous membrane of the stomach, and depending on their location they are called as a cardiac glands, fundic glands or pyloric glands. Because as we have divided the stomach into three parts, so if these gastric glands are present in the first part, that is say pyloric part, then we call it as a pyloric gland. If they are present in the middle region, we call them as a fundic glands, and if they are present at the distal end, we call them as cardiac glands. So inside the stomach there are many small pit-like structures present internally, and in these small pits you will find the presence of these gastric glands. Now what is the function of gastric glands? They are responsible to secrete the gastric juices into the stomach, which are responsible for the digestion of food. Now we move to the second important digestive gland, the largest digestive gland of the body, that is liver. So it is the largest gland which is bilobed in appearance. It is brownish in color and present behind the heart between the two lungs. It is attached with the body wall. It is not loosely present, but the liver is attached to the body wall to give it a firm position. So it is attached to the body wall and the pericardium, which is nothing but a sac-like covering of the heart, by the ligaments. Okay, so it is attached by the ligaments to the body wall and pericardium, and it is also joined to the stomach with the help of a small mesenterial connection. So a mesentery attaches the stomach with the liver. So as I told you, liver is divided into two lobes, right lobe and a left lobe. Right lobe extends dorsally up to the right gonads. If you see near the right lobe, you have a green sac-like structure which is called as a gallbladder. So here you have the presence of a small sac-like structure that is present near the right lobe, which is called as a gallbladder. There are also two bile ducts which open independently into the duodenum. So the important secretion of the liver is bile, and that is being added to the duodenum through these small ducts. So two ducts are opening into the duodenum of the alimentary canal. Yes, so the function of liver is to secrete the bile juice. Now we move to the third important digestive gland, is called as pancreas. This is elongated ribbon-like structure and it is a compact gland. It lies close to the pyloric stomach. So in this diagram you can see this is the pancreas, which is near to the pyloric part of the stomach, and it is situated between the loop formed by these two, that is the stomach and duodenum. And there are many fine ducts which originate from the pancreas, and these are called as a pancreatic ducts. These open into the duodenum. So from pancreas, many pancreatic ducts open into the anterior part of the small intestine, which is called as a duodenum, and secretion of the pancreas, that is called as pancreatic juice, is released into the duodenum. Now if you see the chemical composition of this pancreatic juice, it is alkaline in nature. So this function of pancreas is basically to secrete this pancreatic juice, which is responsible for the digestion of the food in the small intestine. Now we move to the last gland, that is intestinal gland. These intestinal glands are present in the mucosa of the small intestine. Okay, so intestinal gland present in the mucosa, inner layer of the small intestine, and they secrete intestinal juice in the lumen or the hollow part of this small intestine. So the basic function of intestinal gland is nothing but to secrete the intestinal juice, which aids in the process of digestion. So this is all about the four important digestive glands which are present in the calotis versicolor. Now we move to the next part, that is food and feeding and digestion process in calotis. Let us first study the food and feeding of calotis. So calotis is basically an insectivorous animal, and it feeds onto the small living insects like ants, insect larvae, grasshopper, cockroaches, beetles and butterflies or even other insects. So the first step of the food and feeding is the ingestion. So ingestion of the food material, which takes place with the help of tongue. So as we have seen, the tongue of the calotis is protrusible. It comes out of the mouth cavity and it can easily stick the insect on its tip. So with the help of tip of the tongue, the insect is taken inside alive. Now there is a sticky mucus secretion is present onto the tongue. So we have seen there are labial glands which secrete mucus, and these mucus secretion helps to catch the prey. If the prey is larger, for example grasshopper, beetle or cockroaches, then they are held in the mouth cavity and it is crushed by the snapping action of the tooth jaws. So we have seen there are pointed teeth which are present in the buccal cavity, which help in the breaking of the large food. So these jaws acts like a scissors, and they break down the larger food material into small chunks. However, the mastication process, that is the breaking down or the chewing, is absent, and the entire food which is captured by the animal is swallowed as it is by the calotes. So there is no mastication mechanism, but the food is swallowed as it is. Next step is the digestion. So the true digestion in calotes occurs in the stomach part. So in the stomach, hydrochloric acid and pepsin are produced, which help in the breakdown of the food material. So this HCl, being acidic in nature, makes the entire medium acidic, and due to which if any bacteria are present in the food, they will be killed. Now the pepsin reacts with the protein part of the food, and it breaks down into peptones and proteoses. So the breakdown product of the proteins. Now the next phase of the digestion starts in the duodenum, where the bile juices have been already secreted from the liver, which neutralizes the acidic part, and the digested chyme is now emulsified from the food. So it emulsifies the fat part of the food. So the pancreatic juices now come into the play. These pancreatic juices, they are basically alkaline in nature, so they make the entire medium alkaline now. So from acidic it becomes alkaline. Now these digestive enzymes like trypsin from the pancreatic juice reacts with the breakdown product, that is of the protein, that is proteoses, and convert them into amino acids. So still the smaller fragment, that is amino acids, are developed or created or broken down into amino acids. Now amylopsin reacts with the carbohydrate part of the food, and it transforms it into the breakdown product, that is glucose. Lipase enzyme reacts onto the fat, and it converts it into the smaller fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, so all the proteins, carbohydrates and fats are broken down to their monomers. So now whatever the mixture of food which is containing the simple and soluble products, also it contains some undigested food materials, pass into the intestine. Now the lining of the intestine, absorption of the food takes place, and all the soluble products are absorbed by in the small intestine. However, the undigested food material is stored in the rectum, and later on it is dropped from the body periodically through the rectal opening through the anus. So with this we conclude today's lecture. We have understood the structure of the digestive system, which comprises of the alimentary canal and the associated digestive glands, and we have also studied the mechanism of, or basically we understood the food and feeding in calotes and the mechanism of digestion. Thank you for your patience here.